Hello, everyone. So today we're going to get into some Jewish concerns in the late 19th century, fighting anti-Semitism, dealing with some major issues, and some new movements that are going to be formed. Again, the core issues that we still see here are issues from the book of Matthew, from the Gospels, and that was used as source material to specifically blame Jews as the murderers of Jesus. As a result, throughout the years, you have lots of mob violence in many places. Their rights are regularly restricted. Again, and this to give you an idea of how Jews were depicted. I mean, this is Jews and this is from the United States. And I thought this was a good political cartoon because, well, not political cartoon, but it gives you an idea of the hatred that was there. Okay, and the figure of them killing Jesus with all this different type of stuff, and I mean, this is brutal. Okay, this is absolutely brutal. The caricatures of Jews that you see here, I mean, this is a real thing that really wasn't just a European issue. This, in many cases, was a worldwide issue about discrimination and anger, specifically at people of the Jewish faith. Now, early on, though, in say the mid to late 1800s, you start to get some successes. Okay, many nations start granting Jews some rights. For instance, Jews are given full citizenship in France. In many areas, Jews start to be able to get into colleges and medical and law schools. And probably one of the biggest one was Benjamin Disraeli becomes the prime minister of England. I mean, that's a huge move, and it wasn't like he was trying to be like secretly Jewish. He was openly Jewish, and the fact that happened, I mean, that showed you that there were some possibilities of success. But that's in the western part of Europe, so France and England and some of those types of places, things were going pretty well. But in Eastern Europe, we're basically going to be looking at a new wave of anti-Semitism coming through. And Austria was a great example of that. Particularly, let's give an example in Vienna. So Karl Lueger, as you see there on the left and on the right in an awful cartoon, he was the mayor of Vienna from 1897 to 1910, and he was like renowned all over the country for his basic attacks on Jews. Remember, this is part of the old Austrian Empire, which at one point did expel Jews from the country. So Jews are seen as the corruptors of German culture, and he basically tried to curtail their rights. He tried to make it so many would leave Vienna, and Hitler himself actually claimed that while living in Vienna from 1907 to 1913, the actions and words of Karl Lueger incredibly influenced his views on Jews. In Germany, it's going to get a little bit deeper. In Germany, you have the Christian Social Worker Party, okay, that is developed, and that is led by Adolph Stoecker. And he basically used anti-Semitism to get workers to vote for their party. And when there was times of economic uncertainty or issues, him and others would use anti-Semitism specifically to blame Jews for everything. Okay, you see there on the right, he's hanging up, kind of invoking a Martin Luther-esque thing, and as we discussed, Martin Luther was very anti-Semitic as well. Now you see that hep, 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 that's something that would be chanted by mobs as they were attacking Jews, but you can see there that, his policies really push forth to really focus on blaming Jews for everything. Okay, and that when you look at the core problems in the world, it is because of the Jews. And part of that becomes a racial idea. And these are ideas that would help lead to the Holocaust in the future within Germany, is that this concept is that Judaism is not a religion, that it's a race, okay? And that Jews are racially, quote unquote, stained. So even if a Jewish person, say, converted to Christianity, it doesn't matter. That initial stain is there. And this is going to be crucial when we look at some of the ideas of the Holocaust in the future, because this is an idea that Hitler really does push forth. Being Jewish means you're not German, okay? And you can't be, which is, again, is a huge thing. A member of the German Reichstag, I have here a quote from him, Hermann Allwart, really kind of gives you an idea of what will happen. The Jew is no German. A Jew who was born in Germany does not thereby become a German. He is still a Jew. Therefore, it is imperative that we realize that Jewish racial characteristics differ so greatly from ours that the common life of Jews and Germans under the same laws is quite impossible because the Germans will perish. And if you listen to all these ideas that are in there, I mean, huge influence on Hitler. Now, they have a run. The anti-Semitism in Germany has a big run from like 1880 to about 1900. Okay, right around that time. It's going to die off for a little while after that, but like that damage was done. That stuff was established. Plus anti-Semitism that was going on in other countries. You really start to see this idea of trying to racially separate them out. We've talked about this in the same thing with when I talked about the issue, say, for the Irish in the Irish potato famine, or of course, which are going to be the attitudes of the Europeans toward the Africans and Asian populations in the imperialism time period, is all of these ideas take root now, and then they grow and grow and grow. And so when a guy like Hitler comes along, he's already kind of got a base with which to work, and then we get horrible things like the Holocaust. Now, as a response to this, you're going to get something known as the Zionism movement, as I mentioned here. But first, we're going to have a big bump in persecution, particularly in Russia. Russia is where the bulk of the population of Europe lived. Actually, 72% of the Jewish population lived in Eastern Europe, and most of that population was in Russia. So in Russia, right away, starting in the late 1800s, you get increased persecutions, okay? Jews were only allowed into secondary schools or universities based on a quota system. And once numbers were reached, like they were like this amount of Jews could get an education. Once it got to that number, no one else was allowed in. Their living restrictions, they were forced to live in specific areas of the country, and then you still have pogroms. We talked about this before. These are organized massacres and attacks of Jews. You see the picture on the right is the aftermath of that, and it didn't matter men, women, children. This is basically when just, again, organized mobs get around, they just attack people and kill people. And from just 1903 to 1906, so in a 4-year period, there were over 700 pogroms in Russia by itself. As a result, this results in massive migration. Now, you can call it migration, but I think it's closer to being refugees. You're fleeing persecution. You're being singled out by the government. These people were absolutely refugees. And from 1881 to 1899, an average of 23,000 Jews will flee a year from Eastern Europe and Russia. Most go to the United States or Canada, but a number of them will also go to Palestine, which we'll get into later. The question for most Jews that they have is that even in that they get, emancipation in some of the places where they're actually, being given rights, do they assimilate? Do they try to be those people? They're wondering, they're still getting persecuted in certain countries, even in the countries where they get rights. Like, are they even wanted there? Should they even try to stay there? And so the answer to those questions are developed by this concept of Zionism, or the Zionist movement, and that was really led by a man by the name of Theodor Herzl. He's heavily influenced by the Dreyfus Affair, which I talk about in a separate video, but basically a man that was railroaded into a conviction because he was Jewish, and he really started to look around and wanted to find a way or develop this idea that the Jews need their own country. But not only do they need their own country, they need to go to their ancestral homeland, specifically what was Israel, okay? And at this point, it's Palestine and part of the Ottoman Empire, but the idea is to make this move, okay? And wealthy Jewish banking families would really provide money for Jews to try to buy land in Palestine. As I skipped there, it really was a nationalist movement to reform a state, but it's hard. A lot of Arabs a lot of Arabs who are living in the land that are controlled by the Turks, they don't want that. They're going to be very resistant to it, and there's going to be some issues in the future. This comes to an early kind of I don't want to call it a peak because it's going to go on in 1897 when there's the first Zionist conference. This is an international conference that is held in Switzerland, and really to specify what they were going to be all about. And again, what comes out of that is to create a home in Palestine secured for public law for the Jewish people. In 1901, 1,000 people are able to migrate to that area. Between 1904 and 1914, about 3,000 people annually will go to this area, and you start to get kind of a little bit of a pickup for the creation of a Jewish state. Now, World War I is going to put everything on hold, but we're starting to try to find solutions for just this brutal persecution that Jews were dealing with, especially in the late 19th century in Europe. And this is something that we will continue to follow after the World War II period, okay? So again, hope you guys still learned some stuff, and I will see you soon.